You need to know about hazards. A hazard is anything in the workplace that could harm you or your coworkers. All of us have heard about a worker or group of workers who were killed on the job. We have heard of workers falling from heights, getting caught in equipment, or being electrocuted and burned. There is a hazard at the root of every work-related death, injury, or sickness. A hazard can take many forms. Sometimes more than one hazard can combine to create a bigger hazard. You need to know about the hazards in your workplace before you start working. Some of the most common hazards in Ontario workplaces are repetitive motion, especially if you are in an awkward position or you use a lot of force. Think of someone who lifts heavy items over and over again, especially above the shoulders or below the knees. Slipping, tripping, or falling. Think of something as simple as spilled liquid on the floor, a cluttered work area, or a raised platform with no guardrails. Working near motorized vehicles. Think of being hit by a moving vehicle or forklift that is backing up in a warehouse or on a loading dock. Using or working near machinery. Over the years, many workers have been killed or seriously injured by the equipment they operated. Workplace violence. It can happen in many workplaces, such as to a gas station attendant working alone, or conflicts between workers that escalate. You also need to think about less visible hazards related to your work. Chemical fumes, toxic dust or germs and viruses in labs, and healthcare workplaces. Without the proper protection, some of these hazards can make you ill. Exposure to these health hazards can have immediate effects or delayed symptoms, months or even years later. The employer's duty is to make sure that the supervisor is competent, based on knowledge, training, and experience, to keep workers safe and healthy while they work. It's the employer's and supervisor's duty to inform workers of health and safety hazards. It's the worker's duty to report hazards they know of to the supervisor or employer as soon as possible so they can fix it. Employers, supervisors, and workers work together to make the workplace safer. Here are 4 important questions about your job that you need to know the answers to. If you don't, ask your supervisor. What are the hazards of this job? Is there any special training needed for this job? Do I have the appropriate PPE for this job? If I have any questions about safety, who do I ask?
There are many ways that your employer can protect you from workplace hazards. The best way is to get rid of or eliminate the hazard completely. A good example is replacing a toxic cleaning chemical with one that is non-toxic. If the hazard can't be eliminated, your employer can try to reduce the hazard. This can be done by reducing how much of the hazard you are exposed to. An example of this is turning up the ventilation system in a factory or putting a barrier around a dangerous piece of equipment. These are called engineering controls. Another way to reduce hazards is to reduce contact time and frequency of exposure. This can be done by arranging the work differently so that exposure is limited. These are called administrative or work practice controls. If the hazard still exists after trying to control it through elimination, engineering controls, and administrative or work practice controls, your employer will require you to wear and use PPE. The OHSA says that one of your duties as a worker is always to wear or use the PPE that your employer requires.
If your job involves using equipment, your employer and supervisor must instruct you on its safe operation. Some of the machinery in your workplace may have a protective guard to prevent accidental contact. The OHSA says that you must never remove or disable any protective device that is required. An operator's manual on the safe use and handling of the machinery should be readily available to all workers. If there is no operator's manual, you should ask your supervisor for safety instructions to operate the assigned equipment. The OHSA says you have to ensure you don't use any equipment or machine in a way that could injure you or any other worker. You also can't act or behave in a way that could injure you or anyone else. That means not playing games, pranks, or acting in other ways that could injure someone. Your employer may have workplace health and safety procedures in writing. These procedures detail how to work safely with machinery and equipment common to your workplace, along with rules and responsibilities for ensuring the safety practices are followed by everyone. Your employer must ensure you know how to operate the machinery and equipment before you start work. The law says every worker has to have information and training about chemicals or hazardous materials found in the workplace. The Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, WHMIS, regulation states that that you need to receive information and instruction on how to use, store, and get rid of hazardous materials safely. This information is available on warning labels and material safety data sheets, MSDSs. Training on hazards can be done within the workplace or by outside agencies such as secondary education and training facilities. This health and safety training also includes how and where to obtain first aid if injured on the job, and what to do in an emergency. In a safe and healthy workplace, everyone knows about hazards.